For a week, I pretended to consider it. I asked a lot of questions. I listened to John's practical spreadsheets. He had numbers for everything: utility offsets, fair chore schedules, suggested remodeling costs. They all spoke like this was a spreadsheet problem, not a life. Before I go on, if this story already has you feeling the heat, please tap like, share this video, and drop a comment below. I read everyone. And if you want more raw, true stories of family, betrayal, and the sweet, slow burn of karma, subscribe to Revenge Flame. It really helps more voices be heard. I still remember the way the light fell through my kitchen window that morning. Soft, ordinary, like it had no idea we were standing at the edge of a small apocalypse. I was making tea, humming to myself, thinking about the garden I'd planted in June and how the hydrangeas had finally decided to forgive me. My daughter, Anna, used to bring her children here for Sunday pancakes. She used to run her fingers through my hair and call me Mom, like it was the most natural sound in the world. And then the phone call came. It was Anna's voice at first, too cheerful, a little too controlled. Then John, my son-in-law, Mom, stepped in and said the words I still hear when the house is quiet. "We've been talking. We think it's time my parents move in. We'll help, of course. You can stay on, Mom. It'll be better for everyone." There was a pause in my chest that stretched into a cold, wide room. I saw, in a flash, winters of shouting voices and arguments over dinner, the slow erasure of my privacy, the TV tuned to someone else's channel, my little living room rearranged so that visiting feet no longer fit where they used to. My house, the house my husband and I had paid down, paper by paper, handshake by handshake. The place where my daughter learned to walk and my son-in-law proposed beneath the magnolia tree suddenly felt less like home and more like a convenience. A daughter's sigh sounded in the phone, like pleading. "It's just temporary, Mom. We'll chip in. They're getting older. They need help." John's voice, polite but final. "It makes sense. Saves them rent. Keeps family close. You won't be alone." Alone. My hands tightened on the mug until the porcelain creaked. I could picture the spare room, the one with the lopsided bookshelf, remodeled into someone else's den. The sound of foreign radio programs in the hallways, late-night visitors, little demands that grow like ivy if you don't cut them back. That day, something small and hot and dangerous woke up in me. Not hatred, not yet. Just a clear, bright line. My life is mine. And if they thought they could move in without me having anything to say about it, well, they were mistaken. For a week, I pretended to consider it. I asked a lot of questions. I listened to John's practical spreadsheets. He had numbers for everything: utility offsets, fair chore schedules, suggested remodeling costs. They all spoke like this was a spreadsheet problem, not a life. Anna kept saying, "We'll make it easy, Mom. We'll do the heavy lifting." And I could hear her trying to sound like a daughter, not a broker. At night, I sat at my kitchen table and made a list. Not of chores or remodeling estimates, but of moments. Small, sacred things only this house had been for our family. The way my husband used to leave his newspaper on the armchair, the dent in the back step where our dog used to jump from, the warped spot on the floor where the sun hit exactly between 9 and 10 in summer. I wrote them down like talismans. I didn't want a war. I wanted choice. So I began to ask awkward questions. Who pays the property taxes? Who would manage insurance? Would their Social Security cover the extra utilities? The polite questions snagged at John. He offered rehearsed answers, cheerful reassurances. When he said, "We're family, family looks after family," there was a hard edge I'd never heard in his voice before, as if family was a ledger he expected me to sign. Then I found the email. Not by digging in drawers or prying into a locked phone. I am not cruel. It was in a chain of messages John accidentally CC'd my email on. A PDF of his housing plan for parents, with line items and a projected calendar, and beneath the benign budget, a sentence that read, in the clipped voice of efficiency, "We've discussed terms with Mom. She will contribute the down payment and will step aside, as appropriate." The "as appropriate" was a polite mask for entitlement. My palms sweated. The anger that day was not dramatic. It was cold and quiet, the kind that sharpens focus. They had assumed consent. They had assumed I would hand them the keys and shuffle into a corner of my own life like a guest who overstayed. That night, I walked through the house with my flashlight, as if it were a museum, and I the curator. I touched the banister where my husband's elbow had worn it smooth. I opened the window by his old armchair and put my face into the night air to smell cedar and distant rain. I thought of all the movements that had made the house ours. Each memory knotted into resolve. I called my lawyer the next morning. I want to sell, I said, and my voice surprised me with its steadiness. He asked why. I could have said, they want to move in, but I answered simply, I'm tired of other people arranging the terms of my life without asking me. There's a quiet art to choosing a new life. Pricing, showing the house, waiting for the right buyer. I told only Anna I was considering, and even then I framed it as something gentle, something we might do together. She protested. Mom, don't be hasty. John sounded wounded. Their expression felt like betrayal returned. A month later, with the right buyer and a summer full of paperwork behind me, I sold the house. I walked out with a last box containing a few photos and my husband's wristwatch. I sealed the keys in an envelope and left them on the kitchen counter with a note. I chose my life. Then I closed the door behind me and disappeared. Disappeared is dramatic. I moved 2 towns over, rented a small, bright place by a lake, where the birds sang and the mailman asked no questions. I bought the hydrangeas I'd dreamed of. I enrolled in the ceramics class I'd always said I would. My neighbors didn't know who I'd been. They only knew who I was that afternoon, a woman bringing cookies, carrying a canvas bag and a soft smile. Word got back to Anna like gossip in a small chapel. Their shock, their anger, the stunned silence of John when he called to ask about the sale. You sold without telling us? He demanded. You could have at least discussed. His list of accusations sounded like someone reading from an expense report. He had expected bureaucracy, not agency. You expected me to be a footnote in my own life, and I said, I did not consent. Anna cried on the phone. Not with rage, at least not yet. You're my mother, she said. You could have told me first. I told her the truth exactly once. You already did tell me, I said. You told me when you said, we think it's time. When John's parents arrived at my old house expecting boxes and a welcome mat, there was nothing but a new set of keys in another hand and a couple waving to the moving truck in the driveway. They didn't know the story. They only knew the smell of fresh paint and the sound of strangers arranging furniture. That was their new beginning, not ours. What I didn't expect was how quickly the narrative would flip. People in the neighborhood took sides. Oh, the whispers were sharp for a while. But whispers change when facts land. They ask politely and in coffee shops, didn't you hear? She sold it. She moved. And then the curiosity, why? When Anna told her friends what she'd planned to do, the sympathy thinned. You expected your mother to move out and your in-laws to move in? That's a big ask, someone said. They began to see the assumption more than my action. Weeks later, John called again. Tremulous. Quiet. He didn't ask me to move back. He asked oddly for advice about how to help his parents find a nice place. Somewhere in his voice was the embarrassed sound of a man who realized he'd planned a future without checking the heart that would be displaced. Anna visited me a month after the move. She came with my old china, wrapped badly in newspaper, eyes red but not angry anymore. We sat on the little deck by the lake. She apologized in pieces, not all at once. She said she hadn't understood how that small phrase, we think it's time, sounded like dismissal. She said she felt ashamed that they'd presumed. I forgave her. I told her I didn't want the house back. I wanted respect and her presence at my table. She came more often after that. Our conversations had new edges, honesty, boundaries, a soft defense of my life. John called less. He learned how to listen. As for John's parents, the story that once was going to rewind into my life instead rewound away from it. They found an apartment. And with some gentle nudge from me, because I am not without mercy, a small, comfortable community where they were welcomed. They wrote me a thank you note. They said they'd been humbled not by me, but by the idea that someone could redraw the map of a life to fit dignity rather than convenience. Maybe I wasn't running from family, I was running toward myself. Maybe I wasn't being cruel, I was being clear. Because kindness without boundaries becomes a jail with velvet bars, karma doesn't always strike in thunder. Sometimes it arrives as a door closing, a life chosen, a dignity reclaimed. If this story moved you, please like this video and tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to draw a line to protect your life? What did you lose and what did you gain? If you want more raw, real stories of family, revenge, and slow justice, be sure to subscribe to Revenge Flame. Thank you for listening and keep the flame alive